and we've got quite a few people already joining us. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our yet another AI webinar, where we are discovering the elements of the Drupal AI initiative, sorry. And wow, we are up to 34 people already, which is amazing. We will give everyone a couple of minutes to join. And yeah, as we are waiting, if you would, please feel free to drop in chat. Who are you and where are you from? That's always entertaining and interesting to know. Jamie, you can speak to the chat, and I think... Oh, I'm not sure it shows the hosts and panelists. Okay, we have people, meanwhile, we have people from Belgium, from Brazil, from Colorado, USA.
Hey, it's Clayton.
Thailand, UK, Michigan, US, New Jersey. Oh my God, so many people here.
Netherlands.
Hello.
Tokyo.
Oh yeah, we have people from Japan,
India.
Hungary, Iran. Oh my God, that's amazing. Ecuador, more than from the US, Pittsburgh. We got Canada, island of Rügen, Hungary,
Ecuador.
more Ecuador.
Exotic Leicester.
Exotic Leicester, yes.
South African in New York City.
Yeah, lovely. Austria as well.
Leeds.
Ireland.
Hi, Mark.
All right, we are up to 62 people, and I think that we are in a good place to start our webinar, as we have limited time today, of course, of 1 hour, maybe a couple of minutes more. So from here, I will step back and give the reins to Paul here and our great panelists, who will start with quick introduction of themselves.
Good afternoon, good morning, everyone, wherever you are. It seems we've got a big global audience today. We also got a big topic to cover, so we are going to kind of race through all of this. If there's any topics you want us to drive into in another session, then we'd love to hear that. So thank you for joining us today. We're going to be exploring a big topic that's rapidly moving up the agenda for many organizations, identifying where AI can deliver meaningful value in marketing. So I'll be guiding the conversation for the next 40 minutes or so, followed by time for you to ask your questions at the end. So please feel free to use the Q&A box throughout the session as things occur to you. So I'm very pleased to introduce today's panel. Each of our speakers works closely with clients to identify where AI can be used to deliver a genuine difference, not only in terms of tools, but in ways helping people to plan marketing and also to how it's delivered and measured. So we are going to move forward. I think a lot of you already know these people and get into the detail. But before we do that, I want to just begin by taking a look at the broader environment that many marketing teams are operating in right now. So budgets are under pressure. Gartner recently released a report that says that marketing budgets have dropped to around 7.7% of company revenue, down from 11% in pre-COVID days. And this is looking to be the new normal. Combined with that, expectations are rising. Boards want more measurable results, greater efficiency, and faster delivery. So everyone is needing to do more with less. 59% of CMOs have insufficient budget to execute their strategies, and most of them are looking towards AI to have as a possible lever to address this gap, or at least try and bridge it. But there are real risks here. Teams are often starting with the technology and then looking for problems to solve with that technology. And that really delivers value and often leads to stalled initiatives. So to open the discussion, how do you help your clients avoid this solution first mindset? And what does a more structured problem-led approach look like in terms of real marketing environments? Let's start with Matthew.
Sure. So first, I'd start by saying you should be identifying the problems you're trying to solve before jumping into a solution, or worse, jumping into the tools that you want to use. You need to understand the what's before you start tackling the hows. For example, if you look at your process and you identify that content is being reviewed 3 times by humans for consistency or brand tone, that's immediately a potential flag for AI assistance. So when I start working with a client, I'll start by looking for cycles, feedback loops, approval gates, because these are great places to introduce automation and summarization. And I'm not going to get into specific details around projects that I've worked on yet. I think we're going to get a chance to do that later in the talk. But that's where I focus, where things are repeatable, where you can find areas that something that can be automated, that a person can have oversight over. That's your sweet spot. That's where you can get the biggest bang for your buck.
Thank you. So Jamie, from your perspective, I know you've got quite a few AI implementations out there. How did you go through this process with your clients?
Yeah, I suppose a slightly different approach. We tend to do this kind of AI work day. So we'll tend to work with clients because we found with the tooling that we've got, we can move very fast. And so we'll have these days where people come with ideas and problems they have, and then we just try and solve them right away in that day and go through very quick feedback loops. And so we found that as being quite a good way of exploring both the what and the how, sort of at the same time, going back and forth, trying things out with a lot of stakeholders in the room to see like, oh, can it do this? Can it do this? And then from these days, they have something that works, and then we explore, okay, well, how can we scale that? How can we make it more useful? I also think when it comes to what is definitely you want to find problems that are hard ones that present a lot of issues with the client. And the general thing when it comes to LLMs is focusing on problems that are somewhat linked to what you think a clever human could do. And so I think something that trips people up a lot is they expect LLMs to behave like ML, where they're hoping to just throw large amounts of data and it magically give good answers. But with LLMs, it's closer to a huge number of humans and staff. What could they help with? And those are going to be the areas that LLMs can solve more than the traditional ML approaches to AI.
Excellent. So Alan, you're familiar with working with sort of larger enterprises and perhaps those that are in a regulated environment. Do you take a different approach in these situations?
I would say a lot of it, before we get to that how and what, it's actually the why. I know it's probably going back and approaching this slightly differently, whereas there is a perception that AI offers value, but I think in terms of that varies hugely across different types of customers where they perceive value to be had. And I think a lot of that is be able to take what I call it inside out perspective, or an outside in rather, actually more accurately. How does the customer articulate the problem? I think sometimes as solution orientated people, we try and project a particular approach to a solution onto a customer. And this comes down to a basic communication challenge then. So it really is taking that challenge to understand and frame the problem correctly. And I think you can never spend too much time doing that. And once you have a clear idea of what that looks like, it's easier to set goals and then everything else seems to fall into place. But I would say as a final point, I don't want to run out of time here, is it's being very clear about goals that you're undertaking, putting a success plan in place first. Everything else fall into place after that. Just sometimes that bottom-up solutions is not necessarily the best way to approach that, particularly with larger enterprises where change management is always going to be a huge challenge.
Yeah, I think the measurability of success is a key thing that people should take note on. I know we'll talk about that later. So real value begins with clarity about the organization, what you're trying to improve. Let's start to unpack what we really mean when we talk about AI in marketing. There's often a disconnect between what leadership expects AI to do and what it can actually deliver on the ground. So when you hear a client say we need to get into AI, how do you start to put some definitions around the expectations and where AI can actually deliver value? Perhaps we'll start with Jamie this time.
Yeah, I suppose if you're talking to someone who has already low expectations of AI, that's one approach you can take. And if you have someone who has over the top expectations, there's another. And so if you have someone who has over the top expectations, there's a paper by Apple recently that showed AI's inability to do true reasoning. It's more like, to some degree, you could almost see it as a very, very good, clever search engine of all of human knowledge. So it tends to be really good at copying things already there, comparing things to already there in some way. And so when it comes to marketing, one of the issues is that people would like it to be creative, and it can be creative a bit, but it's still drawing from everything that's already been written. It's not really coming up with something completely new. And so a lot of the process with marketing is you want it to just do everything. Um, yeah, yeah, we can share that reference. I'll post it as an answer. You might want to ask questions, by the way, using the question answers thing, so we can reply as we can't chat. Yeah, but um, you kind of yeah, you want to see it as like helping a human pick through what it can do, rather than assuming that it will be able to just brilliantly on its own create something that a truly creative human that has reasoning abilities could do. And then the other thing is about hallucinations. So that's a real concern that a lot of people have. And there are systems you can do to reduce hallucinations. There's ways in which you can have whole systems that have no hallucinations, where AI picks from existing content. But built into how LLMs work, they are creative, they do hallucinate, and they might get things inaccurate. So we've already heard of people who are using AI to find legal cases and present to the judge with no thought, and it turned out it made them up. We've already seen situations where AI have promised price points or deals that aren't offered, and the company's been held responsible for that. So you have to be careful with hallucinations and how you handle that, and how you deal with the users and their attitude towards those hallucinations. And so in the short term, but the easiest and best way to use these kind of chatbot style approaches to LLMs is to help staff prove things faster. Because if you have your staff using it and it hallucinates and gets things wrong, you can rely on your staff to check that work.
Excellent. Thank you. So Matthew, I know that you've been working in enterprise situations where AI has been implemented. I'd be really interested to see how did you go about, setting these reasonable expectations, and how you measured the ROI on these tools to prove that they were effective.
Sure. I think the first thing that I would say is that AI in marketing, it's kind of a buzzword. It's being thrown around without a whole lot of rigor, which which it's amusing, but also a bit of a challenge. I think one of the things that we need to focus on is the fact that AI is really good at pattern recognition. It's really good at summarization, data extraction, automating repeatable processes. It's not going to do something for you like writing your strategy or replacing a creative vision, but it can give your team a lot more space to focus on those things. So, for example, when I was working in my previous role as a business process analyst, I was asked to sort out how AI could be used in three main ways. The first was to figure out whether vendors were following new brand guidelines when they were adding assets to just a massive, massive library of brand assets. The second was to do an audit to figure out whether a brand audit, so we could figure out the lead times and how to improve the efficiency of support staff that were helping explain the new brand guidelines. And the third was to identify efficiency improvements in the overall asset pipeline. So um, I think the thing that I needed to do in this case was actually get the team to slow down in their eagerness to jump in to the hows before we knew the whys and the whats. So we spent time interviewing people in the pipeline to figure out what they do and when they do those things in the process. And for us, we were looking for things that were predictable, repeatable. We spent a bunch of time flow charting that process and figuring out where the bottlenecks were and whether AI could help in making that part of the process more efficient. And in our case, for the asset pipeline, we were able to increase the speed that assets were being generated, partially by having AI do some of the generation of those assets by about 20%. For the SLA reports, we squashed the time by over 80% and reduced the number of people needed to generate those reports by 50% using automators to gather disconnected data scattered all over our systems. And we were able to optimize the support team's efforts, demonstrating them beating those SLAs by 24 hours on average at that point. And with the brand new guidelines, we were able to check if hundreds of assets being produced per day were following those new brand guidelines by using automators that could look at 5 key areas where those assets needed to follow certain things. And we no longer needed a person to be checking each of those assets. We could focus on spot checks for the overall system for accuracy instead. In each of these cases, we took the time to understand the overall process and then iterated portions of those processes rapidly to figure out how and where and when AI could have the most impact. And I want to just be very clear that we never, in this exercise, we never took people out of the loop. It was absolutely critical that people were part of the process and that the AI tools that we built were assistants, they were helpers. They were not something that we ever gave over control to, and it allowed people to check the work that the AI was doing and then focus on higher value creative tasks.
Yeah, yeah, I've certainly heard this many times where, yeah, it's essential to have, as we say, the human in the loop. But also, it's becoming apparent that AI is really good at getting things to average really quick, and then we can use humans to get it to really good. So that's very interesting to hear. So, Alan, I'd be interested in your, wide conversations with clients, whether or not, you've got some advice of where AI does deliver value, and perhaps where people have perhaps approached you with ideas of applications where perhaps it doesn't even.
So I think I agree with some of the things that have been said already, but I think from a marketing perspective, going back to how you opened this session, talking about those reduction in budgets and doing more with less. If you look at it from a marketing perspective, like the marketing goals are pretty much always the same. It's like it's about ROI. It's like you've got a budget. What is your budget? It's primarily about creating campaigns and content and then driving people to those campaigns. That's pretty much where your budget sits. So then that allows us, from the perspective of expectations, to look at, say, a typical workflow to bring that campaign to market. So that actually allows you to zoom in on sort of areas where are very familiar to marketers already. The planning phase is the ideation through to draft, and out to publishing, and then maybe some kind of optimization of that content. Each of these steps is where AI plays a suitable piece, particularly in the early stages of planning as well. When you have a goal, I find AI to be quite good at producing hypothesis and suggesting some content ideas, which can lead to articles, and then themselves can be then refined through process, a feedback process, perhaps linked to your audience personas, that type of thing. So I think part of this is if you're talking the language of the marketeers in particular, the people using this, it's quite easy to position something that's recognizes of what something that looks good to a marketeer and actually clearly shows value in terms of productivity boasts, what we're primarily talking about here. I think the whole accuracy and quality thing, we'll come on to that later. That's slightly different, and that's certainly a valid topic. But expectation wise, taking people on the journey, I agree with what Matthew said around that. Show me something that I sort of recognize and show me how AI will help me do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're starting to hear how, we can frame types of value that AI is suitable for, and I think it sounds to me as if it's really important to identify those early to get the projects off onto the right direction. and making AI adoption something that teams can actually act on. And yeah, it does. Yeah, one of the things which, as you said, Alan, is and I think it's also around the topic that Matthew raised. Yeah, it's about workflows and campaigns and these sequences of tasks which happen in the everyday marketing. So once we've set some expectations and had them better defined, really the next area of focus is practical approaches that you take to help organizations to identify valuable problems and how we might go about interpreting those into solutions where AI can play a role. Perhaps should we start with Jamie on this one? I've seen some presentations that you've given around some of these topics with clients. So I'd be interested to sort of understand the journey of how you kind of identified those issues and broken them down into the areas where, even if it's only partially, where AI is involved.
Yeah, so I would start with I really liked what Jennifer Smith said from Acquia about how she approaches marketing and AI, of starting with processes and understanding those processes. And I have a physics background, but also philosophy and more psychology style stuff. And I think to some degree you have to get into that, of when you're understanding a process, you have to understand the process from a business process management system of just how people interact, but also like how your brain works. Like when you're dealing with something, do you scan through an article first, find patterns, pick that out, take that data and do something with it? Do you read it from front to back and then summarize it? Like, what is your internal process as a human does to solve that thing? And the more you can understand that, the more it will help you understand how to build an AI system. And one of the things that goes wrong a lot of the time is that as a human, if you've done the process over and over and over again, you will take for granted some steps that you do because they're just natural to you. But actually, you have to be quite explicit with the AI. You don't want to make it have to read everything if actually you scan for, I need something that roughly looks like a table. And so mapping out those processes, I think, is very helpful. And then the other really important thing is finding something that's measurable, because it's very hard to go live with anything that you can't measure in some way, and it's a lot easier to sell when you have really clear metrics. So if you can show a particular case of, let's say when we were doing claims management, we could show how we would have a data set of claims that have been managed by a human before and have the humans gone through them all, and we could build an AI system and compare how good the AI got to those humans. And when you can get to 95% automation compared to previous numbers like 20% with 90 to 95% accuracy or higher, depending what you need, it's a lot easier to show what you're trying to achieve. And then when you have a goal in mind, have something that's measurable, that is a goal that you're trying to achieve, everything you build, you can build towards trying to get that goal right. It usually helps you, because if it doesn't get it right, you can go in and find where AI's got something wrong and work your way back to improve prompts or better systems. So I think something that's measurable is really important, and those processes. And if it's something measurable, you can usually see how valuable it is, because the measurable thing will have links to things in that organization. Like with claims management, just being able to process more claims faster is really important, for example.
So one of the things that you've just touched upon is you've kind of described some skills which the way that you go about navigating this, it might even involve psychology and sort of business analysis, which might surprise some people that it's not really necessarily like a process mapping. It's more in the soft skill side of things than the technical side. Do you think that organizations delivering AI solutions are going to need to be hiring different skills, or perhaps people who are working in this area needing to acquire new skills?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say it's less about acquiring new skills and more having a lot more cross-organizational collaboration than you might previously have been used to. And so it would be very common for engineering problems to be solved by engineers. But for example, when we were building some AI stuff for a community manager to help improve moderation, help people find information about a community, etc., the engineers could help build things. But the people in charge of that community, they had much better domain knowledge. They knew how to describe the prompt. They knew how they would talk to their own interns that they're hiring to do those things well. They would have a better intimate understanding of what is it looks like a success or not. It's very easy as an engineer, if you don't have good domain knowledge, to create metrics that look good but kind of miss the point of what is actually being achieved. So I think a stronger focus on the soft skills is a really big area, particularly in 2024 when people are starting with AI. I found people with like a psychology degree, business degree, literature degree, involved in project management, etc. Their excitement for AI and their use of it and their benefits they get a lot faster than people with more engineering and numbers-based background. And so I think valuing your soft skills, collaborating, and it's one of the reasons why we like those kind of AI days of getting everyone in a room and building things, because something that is not obvious to a developer will be very obvious to some of those people with the soft skills of that's never going to fly. People won't like that answer. That's not what we
Yeah.
actually do. Um, yeah.
That's very interesting. And I might just cross this over to Matthew actually, and maybe Alan will have a perspective as well. It's like cross-functional teams as far as the agency side, but there's also thoughts around involving multiple stakeholders at the client side. Yeah, there are concerns around different aspects of AI that we'll come on to in a moment, but I wonder whether in the exploration process, Matthew, perhaps you've involved stakeholders across the business as well.
Yeah, for sure. Um, it's super important for everybody from the folks that are the decision makers all the way down to the doers to be involved in those conversations. And often, just as a data point, I love what Jamie was saying because my degrees are in fine arts and theater, and this has allowed me to engage in projects across um, my time in tech from a different standpoint, think about problems in a different way, and approach them with engineers. I've got an engineering background, but self-taught. Approach engineers with those problems from a different perspective. And I think one of the things that we need to be looking at is as an example, let's just use an example workflow. Say your team spends hours every week reworking blog intros, right? It's a very creative activity, and they're trying to match brand voice. When you sort of dig down, that's pattern-based text-heavy task, right? And you could use a large language model that you've trained using all of the information that you've got from the stakeholders, from the decision makers, all the way down to the doers. Um, you can train an LLM. It could even be a small one with those brand tone examples, and that can get you, with a few lines in terms of a prompt, you can get a blog post 80% of the way to being completed in a matter of minutes instead of repeating that task over and over and over again by using the information that you've gained from the people that you've interviewed in the company. What does that mean? Well, it means that you've got more capacity to do other things. It means that there's less burnout in your teams, and you've got much faster times to getting that content published. So I think the problem discovery is where AI projects succeed or fail. If the problem isn't valuable, or if AI isn't the right tool, just like Jamie was saying, you're going to burn budget and goodwill, and people are going to be confused by what it is that you've delivered. So listening is one of the most important skills I think that people can have when you're starting out on a new when you're
Yeah.
starting out on a new AI project.
Yeah, and this discovery phase, I think, is so valuable. You touched upon a really important point around burning budget, because it was said at the start that the budgets have got smaller, so marketing teams cannot afford to sort of squander budget on AI projects which don't deliver value. I mean, we ought to move on, but Alan, I wonder if you have anything to add to the conversation.
I mean, this has got quite broad now, but I agree. Like this is ultimately a change program, and some of the old traditional skills, you got to take everybody on that journey, and everyone's going to, well, not every, there will be different perspectives on that, and I think, as someone already said, it's that's interesting. That's what I said earlier on was an outside-in perspective on something that's really useful. If you're really looking to affect a change and get some of the benefits that AI promises, which is largely productivity boosts to what people are doing already, you've got to understand their perspective. And I know we're short on time. I was going to give an example of this, but let's move on for now, Paul.
Thank you. Yeah, let's shift now to some of the barriers that can slow or even stall AI adoption in marketing. Whilst interest is high, many organizations face real concerns around some of the technical, strategic, or ethical aspects. So let's start to unpack a few of these in turn, and I'll get your perspective one by one on how you help to guide clients through them. So, Matthew, how do you advise clients who are concerned about where their data goes when using AI tools, especially in regulated or international contexts?
Yeah, sure. So the first thing to note is that if you're going directly to OpenAI or you're going directly to Anthropic or one of the big guys, your data is not private. You do not have sovereignty. Despite what they say around how they use your data, those are policies, and policies can change. So if privacy, data sovereignty, and ownership are really important to you, there are two ways that you can approach this. The first is by hosting your own LLMs, and using tools like Bedrock with AWS to host those LLMs, so you own it. The second is that you can use a trusted third party. Just so happens the company that I work for does this work. So if you don't want to engage in setting all that infrastructure up yourself, which is rather complicated, you can work with a trusted third party that allows you to choose where your data is stored, choose the specific LLMs that you want to utilize, and work with them directly. I think that just to put a pin in it one more time, if you're using a publicly available LLM, your data is not private. You do not have sovereignty over it. The only way to ensure that is by hosting it yourself or using a company that you trust to host it for you.
Okay, and I think we might be coming onto a point which might resolve that issue later. Alan, AI relies on consistent, accessible data, but many marketing teams are working across fragmented systems. What approaches help to address that, and what's realistic when the underlying data isn't perfect?
Yeah, that is a good question. I think that data quality in terms of, I think most organizations are facing that problem, like documentation around products and services or wherever it is, or data isn't quite as accurate when put under the spotlight, especially when you're using it to drive some kind of automation, say something like a chatbot. And it's really driving, this is what a primary barrier to adoption. I had the pleasure of being part of a session with 6 of our major customers in the EMEA region a few months back, and radically different businesses from university through to a CPG business and an insurance company, all pretty much said the same things. It's we it's a trust issue. There's a couple of points on this list here around accuracy, hallucination, but I think there's a more fundamental point here around trust. Do we trust? How far do we trust this technology to do this? And I think that's what's underlying a lot of the barriers to adoption. Everybody's experimenting with this stuff. There's pockets of success, but really, when you're handing over a bunch of processes to an AI, trust comes into this as well. So data's part of that. Is our data right? Probably not. How do we build processes in our organization to ensure that that is possible? It's kind of like an Uber SEO point of view now. That's become even more important. That's another whole subject that we could get into. Maybe a future session, a huge subject, but there's still that barrier of trust, and I think that that's going to take time for people to show that, oh, right, it's quicker to achieve this through this process, and I trust that it's not going to have a negative impact on my business. There's multiple ways of measuring that risk: brand perception, accuracy, all kinds of things, but ultimately creating other headaches within in if this stuff is done wrong. So I think someone said it earlier on, it might have been Jamie, or there is a part of understanding that problem, taking things slowly a bit to understand the problems there, delegating the trust to there. Doesn't stop you experimenting around, but – take people on that journey, get that trust level up.
Yeah, and that links quite nicely to a question for Jamie around, especially with generative AI, where output is not always reliable. I know you've overcome this with some of your clients. How do you help them manage their expectation and also build in quality checks or use AI safely in public situations?
Yeah, so one thing to manage expectations is your aim isn't to get to perfect, it's to get to comparable to what humans do. And humans are not perfect at all. And so we've been doing AI automation in places where we actually have measurable, numbers of how accurate the humans are. And so we have metrics that are more possible to beat or at least get close to. And then there's also going to be a lot of situations where AI getting it wrong, you can manage those risks. And so, for example, with claims managements, they often have an appeal process, and there's going to be an amount of inaccurate claims that you'll be okay with because you already have humans doing that, and there's an appeal process say no, and you can have a policy that when something's appealed, it goes to a human and never AI, for example. So you can do things to mitigate the risks of AI getting it wrong. Um, and then I think this evaluations concept that I alluded to earlier of taking your AI system and testing it against something real. So it could be testing it with real end users trying it out and something like A/B testing, or even better with human evaluated content in the past. Or you can even sometimes use an LLM to do the evaluation. And I think evaluations are really important. I almost think real AI stuff needs to start with an evaluation. Start with something that you're testing against and show that you can hit that. Finally, where we're going is particularly in Drupal AI, is we're starting to look at, we've got with a chatbot, the LLM is writing a response and it's writing the text that goes to the end user straight away. But that's not the only way that you can do things. So we've already heard there's some other tools like N8N, and in Drupal we have ECA. So these other tools where you can lock down exactly what the LLMs do and how the automation works. And in Drupal, you have a big store of data that's very structured. So one of the goals that we're planning with the Drupal AI initiative is to get to a place that if we can generate landing pages with Experience Builder, instead of having AI write the answers, it could assemble the answers from a collection of data. So you used to have like some FAQs maybe for your products, but imagine a world where you really go all out and have a lot of FAQs for all those products. And when people start asking questions, it would create a version of that landing page for that product with like questions answered, but they're all human written and evaluated.
Yeah.
Or if you're applying for a new course for university, instead of having it write up, you could go for this course and this is what it costs, and it might get it wrong. Instead, it could assemble stuff. And so there's a lot of things we can do that I think we can get to a point of it reducing it to zero hallucinations. Now, the information might not be fully relevant like you have with search right now, but at least there won't be anything that is wrong because it was all made by people.
Yeah, and of course, we're assuming that everything's happening live as well. Yeah, we've already talked about how it can be used in a workflow environment, and maybe there is a checks and measures in place before it gets put out in the wild. I think we've also talked about how AI can be used in the back office to improve things, and maybe enhancing search, for example, where it never gets out into the world anyway. It's maybe enhancing the discoverability of text. So, yeah, really interesting. So another thing, back to you, Matthew, is around cost. So these tools can seem low cost to begin with, but when you consider things like integration, training, and then when you scale up and start to use lots of tokens and the complexity scales, so can the cost. How do you go about working with teams to help them understand the full picture of what they're committing, or so they understand before they commit?
Yeah, I think the token costs are probably the least important thing to talk about. I think that the starting with talking about the total cost of ownership is more important. And the things that you've sort of put your finger on. For example, licensing. Are you having to go through a licensing model? Now you can avoid a lot of that by using open source, and as an open source um, fan, I would encourage folks to go that route to avoid those costs. But there's also the implementation, right? It's integration of existing systems, vendor support, APIs. the training where you need to upskill team members, the time that it takes to document what you've built, um, the fact that it's super useful when you're rolling something like this out to have internal champions, people who have the soft skills, who can convince others that what they're buying is worth it. You need to keep into account maintenance, updates, bug handling, the administrative overhead. All of these things cost. And then finally, what's your governance model? Who owns the model? Who owns the data? Are you on the hook for auditing AI decisions? So I would say that the first thing that you should probably do is go through a rough timeline, first 90 days map. Think about use the first couple of weeks for exploration and sandboxing. Use the next 3 weeks or so for your first workflow integrations, and then use the next 7 to 12 weeks on expansion, figuring out what works or abandonment. It is okay to say something didn't work and let it go. Um, I think then what you should probably do is think about total cost of ownership models. You could do a couple of scenarios. One which could be internal deployment using open source and training, the other using a SaaS subscription, API usage and support plan. Pretty sure that scenario A is the one that you'd want to go with. But let people see the return on investment side by side. And I think one thing that is super important is as you go through this process, do what I call a pre-mortem, not a post-mortem, but a pre-mortem. Um, Ask a year now from now, this rollout failed. Why did it fail? Let's go through all the scenarios of why something could have gone wrong. And you'll find that when you go through this exercise, people start to really think about what the hidden costs are, like integration bottlenecks, content rework, or even people will start to bring up stuff like internal political friction. So I think that those are all really important ways that you can approach cost. Now, I'm going to go back to tokens for just a second, because you've heard horror stories where people have spun up a system and then suddenly they've got like this $400 bill for a day of experimentation. You can deal with that issue in a couple of ways. The first is maybe you want to start with some small models locally. You could use a llama instead, so you're not actually burning tokens with a provider. Or you can work with a company that's giving you a flat fee on those
Yeah,
tokens.
yeah,
That helps.
that's excellent. Yeah, I love the idea of these pre-mortems. It's always a retrospective that seems to happen.
Yeah.
um, Alan, I've got one for you. Yeah, what questions should organizations be asking vendors to assure future flexibility?
I think this is a challenging one because nobody knows the future with AI. It's moving so quickly. But that said, there is a certain pace that organizations can move at. There's a maximum speed at which they can move at as well. And it comes back to what we were talking about earlier on. There's some familiarity and what we can attach to there. Sorry, can you repeat the question? I think I might have lost the thread a little bit there.
Yeah, I mean, what are these awkward questions you can ask a vendor to be sure that you're actually, you can either offboard or maybe you can change models, those kind of things. Or does their platform support,
Yeah.
innovation and something new comes along that supersedes something in their platform?
Oh, I see. I see the point. Well, absolutely. I mean, that's almost a kind of the first question that comes up in some cases. We want a foundational layer. I know we're coming on to a foundational question next, but absolutely, like how have you architected this solution? How can we abstract certain levels of, like, for example, model selection, being able to apply different models to different types of requirements as well. It's really important to be able to do that stuff. And it's interesting because like depends where you focus from the perspective of say back to content and talking about Drupal's ability to manage content versus sort of broader requirements, say from marketing teams like asset management again and performance of assets and creating ROI around that kind of stuff. It's a huge piece. But I think certainly having a modularity to the approach and an abstraction layer present within there, which is exactly why we're all talking about our favorite project here today. is a great basis for that. And I think as a community, it really is about bringing that to the forefront as well. Like sometimes the technology you're using as a foundational layer is the great start point for that. And I
Yeah.
think we would all agree on that here. And it happens to turn out from even from people who come from outside the community. I work primarily on the marketing side. There's a story to be told, and there's a fit for purpose aspect to that as well. And with Drupal, we're finding that that's a pretty easy question to answer, and it's ticking the most of the boxes that come up.
Mm.
I could talk about this for ages, but
Yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna pass the baton here.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's come to my mind is how it's not just about flexibility, maybe innovation. It could also be flexibility in that the requirements you discover that need to be solved may change over time as well. And at the AI Summit in London, we were looking at other platforms, and they were serving quite a narrow solution for a specific
Yeah.
thing. And you end up buying quite a lot of different platforms to be able to do all the things you want.
Well, I think this one last point I would make. That's a good point, and it's like you can look at short term, mid-term, and long term. I don't think anyone can say with any confidence what a long term looks like. There's a shift between layers of AI that's effectively sit on top of SaaS products at this point, and
Yeah,
then there's a sort of a push towards sort of basic agentic processes, breaking down things into smaller processes. And then
yeah.
back to what Matthew was talking about earlier on, the business process aspect of that. I think that's probably sort of midterm as people mature in this space, but it makes sense to think from short to midterm in some cases. Certainly, midterm is a good place to think for when it comes to
Yeah.
AI. You've got to, otherwise you achieve nothing. It's analysis paralysis.
And I know we're touching on a topic that Jamie will be itching to talk about. So we'll come on to that in a minute, Jamie. So as we just heard, there's a real range of real and legitimate concerns that come out of AI adoption in marketing, but from data governance, integration challenges, ethical considerations as well, which we've had to move on from. And also long-term flexibility. This is where Drupal really offers a considerable and practical foundation for AI. So I want to just hand over to Matthew for a few moments so he can sort of summarize why Drupal AI is such an appealing framework.
Sure. I'm going to be pretty fast because I'm sensitive to the time that we've got left. But I think one of the things that's really important to understand about Drupal as a framework for this work is that you can create end-to-end experiences extremely quickly. Like when I say extremely quickly, I do a lightning talk where I'll build a simple automator from start to end in 5 minutes in front of an audience. And that has a whole user interface. It has a back end. It's got a front end. It's got all of that because Drupal gives us all of this out of the box. So as a foundational layer, it's tremendous. The other thing that people don't think about is how the Drupal AI tools have been literally built as an abstraction layer. So if you're in a situation where you need to swap out a model, it's extraordinarily quick for you to be able to do that kind of thing. You can switch things up very, very quickly. If you find yourself in a situation where you need to change providers entirely, you can do that quickly, and it's not gonna to affect the user experience in any significant way. So there are all kinds of reasons. It's fast. It's relatively inexpensive. You can show how things can be built quickly. It's super quick for prototyping. And it all comes in this neat little open source box. No other open system is doing this at this point. So it's a tremendous advantage to both agencies who are trying to move into the AI space, to companies that want a solution that can be self-encapsulated, for all of us. So that's where I would leave you. And I could talk about this for hours, but I'm really sensitive that we're already 10 till the hour.
Yeah. Thank you, Matthew. I mean, just as I want to quickly skim over some takeaways here, and then we'll go straight into Q&A. So begin with defining clear business problems, and also look at outcomes that you're seeking. So return on investment, that's crucial. You need to consider governance early so that you encounter any blockers early on and overcome them, and understand the cost beyond the licensing, as we've been talking about just now. and do buy flexibility. Look for transparency, so how things work, and also make sure that there are integration options in the platform that you select. That gives you the future proofness, and do make sure you build ethics into the process. And that could be things like how much energy is this all using, all the way through to how it's making recommendations and decisions on your behalf. And also make sure you engage stakeholders across the business, both in terms of your side and also the client side. That's a real recipe for success. So I just need to have a look at some of the questions that have been asked. But there's been one that I've noticed earlier from Serhat. Apologies if I said your name wrong. So I think the director at Jamie. Could you please specify whether or not we're primarily focusing on LLMs, or if the scope extends to include broader automation tools and platforms like N8N?
Yeah, so it was supposed to be broader. So the approaches that you take when we think about what tools are the right things for the job, obviously we are assuming to some degree that we're going to make use of LLMs in some way, but in reality, you don't just use a chatbot. You don't just go to chatgpt.com and start doing things. When you build these applications to do something, you'll use a series of tools to confine LLMs to a particular goal or to achieve something. Like you might want it to answer questions by it searching content on your site, and we call this RAG, where we get it to search for content on your site, provide that to the LLM, and give an answer that way. Or you can do a lot of things with automation, like N8N, and in Drupal we have automators, agents, and ECA that allow you to construct a very specific flow of automation and have LLMs make very specific decisions. As a general rule, I am very big on the belief that the future of AI is still going to need some kind of orchestration tool for these things, as we find both from a cost and accuracy point of view. If you make your agent or LLM do as little as possible, it's much more likely to get it right. If you try and get your LLM to do everything in the world, the rule of thumb is if an agent has more than 5 to 10 tools, it can start collapsing. It starts getting things wrong. And we're seeing two philosophies with building AI applications. Kind of the OpenAI Claude people seem to truly believe we're going to get to some kind of AGI-like thing where you give an agent and it just does anything in the world and just clicks around a system and doesn't need to be trained anymore. And I think it's unlikely that will materialize, and it's more likely that we'll need tools. As you said, automation tools and platforms. And in Drupal, we're pushing forwards with ECA automators and our approach to agents.
Thanks, Jamie. I've got a really good question from Patricia here. So I'm a public health and humanitarian specialist and a technical lead at Vaccine Confidence Project for IOM. In summary, they have had, they work with refugees, currently Ukrainians, Afghans, Syrians, and Sudanese, and they've had their budget cut due to political climate. And one of the biggest donors has reduced their funding. So they're in the process of trying to identify ways to still provide these solutions that they offer with drastically limited humans and funding. Does the panel have any ideas or suggestions on how they can use AI to achieve the same outcomes with a very small budget with AI?
Wow, that's a heady question. So Patricia, my last job was with Pfizer, and we were utilizing AI to do all kinds of different things, like the marketing stuff that I talked about earlier, but also it was utilized. It's been utilized to do things like speed up trials around different vaccines and drugs and so on. I think the trick for you, and to be clear, you can use AI to help with that kind of work, but it requires setup, and that setup initially is quite expensive, but once you get to the other side, it can drastically reduce costs and increase speed. It's also super important if you're going to use AI in these kinds of areas to avoid AI setups that will hallucinate. So you remember heard of Jamie talking about how you can set up an AI model so it's only answering questions exactly as you've put them into the system. Um, that's really, really important if you want to be in a position where you're not going to end up with results that could be harmful from a human standpoint, right? What you're talking about here is super 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 important that you get the answers right. Um, so you're going to want to have a human in the loop as well, or humans in the loop as well, ensuring that those results that you're getting are accurate. And you might not need to check everything, but you're going to need to at least check some of the results. Um, I would be happy to talk to you on a one-to-one basis if you want to reach out to me in Drupal Slack or grab my email from I think the email is in the slide deck. We can get it to you in one way or another, but I'm more than happy to have a chat with you about this work. And I will go ahead and put my information into chat as well.
Yeah. Jamie, I know that you've responded in the Q&A section. Perhaps you could elaborate on some of the things you said.
Yeah, it's as I mentioned in my response, I think it's really good to write out those processes. So we were talking about, in the question, it was about we are increasing health access and navigation to refugees. So how do you go about doing that? So do you find them specific pieces of content? They do it themselves. Are you chatting to people and answering questions that are very niche? Are you connecting people to something? So you listen to what someone's saying and you're bringing them to a particular thing. Are you pushing information out? So what is it those humans are doing in that process that when you have cuts are going to cause problems with people being able to access those things? With a better map of those processes, it's easier to think different things you could do. So you can start using automators if your goal is to connect people to either content or particular services or something. You could use a chatbot to reply if you're just giving advice, although the question you have to ask is how bad are hallucinations? And in these situations, good chance it's higher. But is no answer better than some answer better, inaccurate answer, but something better than nothing? So that's a question to ask. Um, and then the other thing is like, yeah, metrics. Like, what are you trying to achieve? Is it someone happy? Is it someone with accurate information, which is what processes you already have in place to check that your humans are giving right answers. So if you can take a look at the metrics you already use, that will also help. And I briefly mentioned some of the tools. There's Drupal Forge. So I gave you a link to a place where you can try and see AI search for something a bit more techy. And then Amazy have try.amazy.ai. They have another Drupal search thing. So there's a couple of places there where you can take a look at how the AI search worked. But there's this new thing which we call agentic search that is showing more promising results than other forms of AI search that you could take a look into.
Thanks, Jamie. We've shared some emails on the Q&A. We've got 2 minutes, and we've got a question from Digby. Can you give some examples of potential LLM solutions where users can have data sovereignty?
So I'm going to engage in a shameless pitch. Amazy AI. If you go to amazy.ai, we have a program that allows you to set up a provider directly within your Drupal instance. You can also set it up using API keys if you would prefer. But that solution is all set up. We've got the infrastructure built. You literally just have to give us your email address. You'll get 30 days of in the trial for free. After that, the pricing tiers are fixed and are extraordinarily reasonable. They guarantee data sovereignty, region, and privacy. And none of your data is ever used to train any models or anything like that. Other than that, you really have to set things up yourself. Use one of the open source models that's available out there, or the semi-open source models, and use a tool like, for example, Bedrock to to set up your own basically set up your own provider. And that's totally possible, and I'm sure lots of companies have done that, particularly large companies. But if you're a smaller organization, it's more difficult for you to do those setups because you're going to need to have the expertise around it.
Thanks, Matthew.
And just something a little bit about that as well is you can also use tools like LM Studio and Llama, where you can actually host the models on your own laptop or your own machine. So then it's not going to any third party. And
Yeah.
if you go down the approach of automation, I've seen some really big enterprise clients use automation and AI where they started with Claude 2 and the new models have not really mattered. So when you really, really well design your AI flow, these smaller truly open source LLMs can work to make it so that overall you have an end goal that works really well. So you can explore that. It's a lot more work to get it running and to design it, but then you can have something that is like just LLMs that are hosted yourself. And we are starting to see evidence that fine-tuning these very small models might work. And anecdotally, I know people who have, and it's been successful. So there's other approaches you can take as well, alongside the trusting a provider of these LLMs.
But when you trust the providers, please keep tuned to the information on the Drupal.org, as we are always trying to provide all the information. Also, feel free to join the Slack channels dedicated to the Drupal AI initiative and join the newsletters that we are sharing on the monthly basis. And as of recently, we have a specific page on LinkedIn dedicated to Drupal AI, where you can also find out all the most recent news. So you are very welcome to join there. And my interruption is related to the fact that we are ran out of time. So I would like to take a moment to thank all of our panelists for a very lively discussion, which I personally enjoyed very much. And of course, to Paul for leading this amazing conversation.
And not least, thank you for everyone for listening.
And thank you, everyone, indeed, for joining this this talk. I think at the highest moment we had 80 people joining this webinar, which is amazing. And it has been recorded, so for everyone who did not have time or opportunity to join, it will still be available on the YouTube. As soon as the recording actually will be processed, we will download that. With that, thank you, everyone, and hope you will enjoy the rest of your week. And please stay tuned for the news about Drupal AI initiative.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.